This month's Snacks magazine covers a variety of issues, including an excellent feature on Henry Armour. We'll be talking about that in future podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about the next big taste and some words like swicy and swalty. Joining us today to talk about food and to make you hungry and thirsty is Amanda Baltazar. She is the writer of the story. She's written several things for Snacks magazine, and she's been on podcasts with us before. So thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me.
So I said we're going to talk about what's hot. That does involve the words swicy and swalty, which are, derivations of hot spice. But what I really want to talk about first is what is hot as in terms of trend or fad or whatever we'd like to call it. So first off, great article looking at both food and beverage. And in our industry, of course, there's a lot in the way of food profiles that you can get packaged items. But what we're going to talk about largely is the prepared items. So food and drink that is prepared, 27.7% of in-store sales. So things you can directly control when you can build out your own menu. So I guess the first question is, you get this assignment, you look at this, and your first question has to be, I assume, when you're talking to retailers, why do you want to do something different? Why do you want to look at flavors? So talk a little bit about that. Like, what were some of the insights that you got when somebody says, well, this is why you try a new flavor?
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the nice introduction. And I think the reason retailers want to look at new flavors is it shows they're current, but everybody's always wanting to try something new, especially if you look at the younger generations. They want to have something exciting, something different, and most importantly, perhaps something they've seen on social media.
Yes, and yes, if you don't post it, it didn't happen. And but that is great free marketing. And I know I said we aren't going to talk about packaged items, but Dr. Pepper has really had great success over the last couple of years in introducing these LTOs, these limited time offer flavors. And of course, they have a lot of fans that love their regular recipe, but they keep on coming out with little tiny changes that really push their brand forward. Somebody wants to try it. And that's the first step in getting somebody back.
And I think these small changes just excite people just enough that they have to go out and try them, Jeff. Just either to say they have or to check off a box on their own personal list. But it keeps the excitement high.
And another thing that you pointed out that is, I think a lot of the retailers said that there's a difference between being first out of the box in something, first out of the gates, I guess, if you will, to try something new, and being not behind the trend, but hitting a point where somebody's actually aware of it. Because one of the old adages, whether it's politics or whether it's communications, is if you have to explain it, you already lost the argument. And it's somewhat similar, I would imagine, with food, where if you have to explain it, you lost the sale. So there has to be at least familiarity with what you're doing, and hopefully it's new.
Yes, I think if you're that fancy independent restaurant or upscale boutique store, you want to be the first out of the gate. Convenience stores don't want that. They'd lose 90% of their customers. They want everyone to know what it is on their shelf in their prepared food section. So they want it to already be somewhat mainstream. And one retailer I spoke to, Jeff, talked about how if you go to Trader Joe's, you really see new, exciting things. That's even a little early for a convenience store. So they likened it more to by the time it hits Costco, and we all know what it is, that's when a convenience store wants to launch it.
And with food, I would imagine it's a little bit more, you have to hit it, because if you're talking about a sandwich or something that costs several dollars, somebody's going to make a decision on something that they have to know a little bit about. But when you're talking about a beverage, say a fountain, or whether it's frozen or cold or hot or whatever, you probably can take a little bit more of a risk because you have a little lower price point. So you can try something a little bit more edgy as a beverage because it doesn't affect a whole line of cooking or something like that.
Yeah, it's lower cost and it's lower in terms of you haven't just had to go without lunch. You've had to go without some liquid, which I think we'd all prefer to go without liquid than lunch. And beverages are also very innovative right now. And again, coming back to the younger generations, I know my own daughter, she equates a beverage with dessert. It's kind of a toss-up between the two. For me, they're completely different. So a beverage is really important to a younger consumer. And there's a lot of blended flavors that happen. So you can do a lot within one drink.
Yeah, and I remember when the Coke Freestyle first came out and our kids were much younger, they would take a little bit of time. Probably there'd be a few people behind them in line saying, come on, kid, hurry up, hurry up. But it was probably about 6, 7 different flavors in there. They made their own little stratified drink, and that made them happy. You see that with frozen beverages too. But you introduce some of those, and it gives somebody the chance to kind of also have a somewhat of a new menu item, if you will, or a new tool to create their fancy recipe drink.
Yes, and either creating them themselves. I know there is one convenience store chain, I forget which, where you can blend your own drinks. But for
Maverick,
the retailers,
yes. And
Maverick,
they have the signs. Yes, they have the signs there. It's like, here is the cheat code for this beverage and all that. So, yeah, it's there's a lot of ideas out there for beverages. So the one phrase I really liked that you used in talking about how somebody figures out if a new flavor is hot or going to be hot is they look for ripples in pop culture. How would you define that phrase?
I think a trend, a couple of people mentioned this to me, a couple of convenience store retailers, that something might start in an independent restaurant and then it goes to a small chain of maybe 6 or 7 locations, and then eventually it will be in the massive chain that's across the country. So that's one ripple. The grocery stores is one of the other ones where you've got different products coming out in Trader Joe's, but Costco is the ultimate. Mm-hmm. And then for a flavor specifically, seeing it in different consumer goods, in different flavors of chips or candy. There's all these little things that all run together.
So we'll get to the flavors in just a sec, but I also like there's a couple other things that you talked about in your article about what people do is you had already mentioned going to grocery stores, going to Costco, seeing what's hot there, but also the opportunity to visit restaurants and seeing if something new there. And you don't even have to leave your house. You can just use your computer and find out what might be happening in terms of trends.
Yes, I talked to a lot of the convenience store executives, the people on the menu development and flavor side, and they had lots of different tricks for staying on top of it. Just going to a store, looking at research, contacting flavor companies, looking at data from companies like Data Central, and then also surrounding yourself with the right people, talking to chefs, going out to restaurants and talking to people there. And for, I think, nearly all of them, they involved their employees in the decision-making process when they were testing new flavors, because their employees are also pretty much the demographics of their customers. So it's very important for them to kind of get their buy-in.
Yeah, that was something I saw. I visited Why Not Stop convenience stores. They have something called Team Fest down in Louisiana, where they bring together every team member in a full day. You can either go to the morning or afternoon, and they show them, they talk about the numbers, what the stores are doing, etc. This is Annie Gautier's store, a company. She talked about it in the general session at the NAC show, but what was really cool is, so we're going to try this new product, etc. But they also had the chefs bring out new items, and the people who will be pushing these items, selling these items, talking about these items, were the ones that were making they were providing insight on whether this item should hit the shelves. And simple things like not only taste, but how easy is it to carry? How easy is it to eat in a car while driving and things like that? So, you got to involve the people who are in the store and get that feedback. And they also can be your biggest advocates.
Jeff, one other thing they mentioned was if you're considering a new menu item or introducing a new flavor, you do also have to think about how many applications it has on the menu, how many different places can you feature this, and what else is needed to support it. Is there an ingredient that's not used anywhere else? That's probably going to make it a no-no if it's for a one-time deal on a menu.
Yeah, if it's something like ostrich egg or something like that, it's like, I don't really have another use for this. But absolutely, because when you hear about convenience stores when we're putting together menus, it's like, okay, we're going to use tomatoes, we're going to use peppers, we're going to use whatever we're going to use, but we're going to use it for all kinds of different things. Because if you're only using it for one menu item, that menu item's not moving, you're going to have some issues with some shrink. So I mentioned we're going to talk about some of the hot flavors now. I'll let you define first. I had started out by talking about swicy and swalty, which were two themes that you touched upon. You give the definition of what they are and how we might see those on menus.
They are bringing together spicy and sweet, Jeff, which I think is a combination that we all love. You eat or drink that item and you're not quite even sure what's going on in your own mouth, but it's a kind of like having a sour gummy. You have that sour first and then the sweet. I think most of us like that flavor. There were one or two mashups that I had mentioned. Hot honey is one. So honey sweet, but we should expect to see it with flavors added. And a couple of people mentioned chilies. So that kind of fits in with that swicy profile.
Mm-hmm. And you see that on pepperoni pizza in different parts of the country, have different trends. So when we talk about trends, also what you might see as cutting edge in New York City may take a while to get, a couple hundred miles inland or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What's cutting edge one place is just too far advanced for another.
Yeah. So you had mentioned hot honey. What were some of the other ones? And you were talking about also, as we mentioned earlier, people have to be aware of them. So they have to be, when we talk about these trends as what is popular now, some of these things have been around a while, but that's the point. They have to have been at least recognized by people, so they're more likely to buy them.
Yes, Jeff, a couple of others. One was more complex heat from a variety of peppers. And while we convenience store customers may not necessarily know those peppers, we know what a pepper is, what a chili pepper is, even if we don't know the specific one. So we can expect to see more of that, more fermented and pickled foods, which have been talked about a lot in the last few years with talk about gut health. One that just stood out kind of on its own is miso caramel, which really appealed to me. Again, that's the savory and the sweet together. And there was a very interesting one that's kind of visual, but it was desserts that don't look like desserts. And someone used the example of a dessert that looks like sushi, but doesn't taste like it's sweet. It doesn't taste like sushi. I'm not sure how appealing that would be, but that was one of the other ones I thought was interesting.
And that is, I imagine, a total social media moment where somebody's trying that. It looks like this. And then you have that reaction, and all of a sudden people are liking it. So it's food for you, and also food for your Insta feed, I suppose. So two types of feeds, and also you of course said pickle flavors, because if you've been to the NAC show the last couple of years, the almighty pickle dominates, and that goes for beverages as well. We saw some beverages, Pabst had a pickle beer coming out. There's some muscle recovery drinks that involve pickle, but you also said there were a couple pickle beverages that were on some people's menus.
Yes, and I'm sure they appeal to some people. I'm not sure they appeal to me, and perhaps not you.
Well, maybe it's now a good time. I was doing some research, or actually first listening to the radio, and somebody was talking about a new food trend, and it is sauerkraut pizza. And so I Googled it, and it turns out it's not new. I've seen about it for like 3-4 years. But and Andrew Zimmern, among others, he spoke at the NAC show last year. So renowned chef, he has a recipe for it. But it's basically sausage and sauerkraut on a pizza. And depending on who you are, you might either be making a face now or saying thumbs up. But then I saw, and you had mentioned mixing flavors. This starts to get controversial. Doing that and then adding another ingredient that people talk about controversially on pizza, pineapple. So sauerkraut and pineapple on the same pizza is supposed to be the ultimate. And I have not tried yet, so I can't judge it. I don't know. I don't think you're necessarily going to be in the game of recommending what people should try, but I imagine that you're not going to say, yeah, why don't we order a couple of those pizzas?
I wouldn't say no to that one, though. I'd give it a try.
Because it has just enough of that, pizza. I guess pizza can carry a lot of different things. You go to some pizza places and they'll put all kinds of different ingredients on there.
And sometimes the really unusual can be appealing. Just to say you've done it. I many years ago was in a restaurant that had a peach and strawberry soup that was savory. And I thought, well, I have to try it. And it actually was fantastic.
So, thinking about another trend and just thinking about pizza, Korean barbecue. I've seen that on pizza. And I know you also talked about Korean barbecue being a trend. And for these trends, you don't have to be from that culture to be able to do it. You just have to know if the audience wants it. And do you have the right test group to make sure that it tastes right and you're going to move some of these things? Were there any other ethnic cuisines, you had mentioned miso and some other things, that you saw as a potential trend that people might want to look out for? Wasn't necessarily worth writing about in this article, but might gain some traction in 2026?
There was fruits, Jeff. These more Asian fruits. One was yuzu, which we've heard of, and most of us have, and guava. There was a third one that I never heard of, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, calamansi, which is a combination of lemon, lime, and orange flavors, which again is interesting, not too weird, so could appeal to the convenience store audience.
Well, you price it right, and it might, and also if you're able, sample. That's also another good way to get things out there. It's like, wow, I did not expect that. So I guess the big question in summarizing what you wrote about with flavor and trends is, what's a fad and what's a trend, and how do you know when to cut your losses? How do you know when something's just like, this is the biggest thing ever, and then it turns out it's not the biggest thing ever? Are there a couple things that people might want to look at in terms of what is a fad and what is a trend?
It's become a bit blurred recently, Jeff. It used to be that a trend lasted a long time. Example, smoothies, which came out in the kind of 90s, they've lasted. And a fad was here one day and gone the next. But with social media, it's blurred because kids want to jump on things and they try it and then they jump off. And of the people I spoke to for the story, it's important. It may just be a fad and it may just be around for a month, 3 months, but it is important to menu it and to show that you're kind of with it with the younger generations.
Yeah, and also you have to understand your audience. I know that depending on where you go in the country, when I was saying I went to Team Fest in Louisiana, they used to have tacos, and they said, this is a fried chicken crowd, and the tacos didn't do as well, so we're going to focus on what we do. But there is the opportunity to test with LTOs and to trial basis if you have more than a few stores, to also trial at a couple stores and see how it plays out before you roll out one of these big flavors menu-wise. And it turns out it's more of a fad than a trend. So I'll give you the last word on flavors and what it all means for convenience stores. What do you want the big takeaway to be at the end of this podcast or at the end of reading your article in the December Knacks magazine?
I think the big takeaway is convenience stores need to continue innovating, but they don't need to be too crazy. They need to think about what their customers will understand so they don't lose their audience. But what's going to excite them would just spur that extra sale. Well,
that's a perfect end to this episode, and just a taste of what is in that December issue of Knacks magazine. Amanda, thank you for joining us once again. It's always great to talk to you about some of the insights that you pulled and put into Knacks magazine, and also some of the things that you just ran out of room to say. So once again, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by Knacks and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.